This is the Architect Exam Podcast, the official podcast of the Young Architect Academy.
Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. Michael Rasika here, and I'm with my friend Emily. What's up, Em? How you doing?
Hey, good. How are you?
Really good. We were just talking about how there are so many ARE candidates who have been getting CDT certified. They just announced CDT results, and I feel like people just came out of the woodwork. I got my CDT certification. And before we talk about CDT, for people who aren't familiar with what it is or why it exists or anything about it, some people have never even heard of it before. Let's define it. Let's explain what CDT is. And one of the things I've learned through the years, Emily, is that everyone's got their own explanation as to what the CDT is. And so I have my version. Emily's got her version. I guess I'll go first. And Emily, anything I forget, you can fill in the blanks.
Okay.
All right. So when I say CDT, this is a test. It's a certification about all the different phases of a project, about when an owner says, I want to build a building, and they find an architect, they go through, they program the build, they figure out how big does the building need to be. They start designing the building, schematic design development, construction docs. They document, they detail, they pick out all the materials, they put together beautiful drawings and specs. They send it out, they bid the project, they hire a contractor, the contractor starts building it, they build the building, the owner moves in, they use the building for 50 or 100 years, and then the owner moves out, and then the building's taken apart and removed from the construction site. And the CDT is about what happens during every one of those phases. And more importantly, who's involved? Anyone that has any contribution to the project or even uses the building or has any part of that project, what's the role, relationships, responsibilities between every single party that's involved in the project. And the thing about the CDT is it's baseline information that everyone, architects, engineers, contractors, interior designers, office people, lawyers, real estate agents, anyone who works in architecture, engineering, construction, this is basic information that everyone needs to know. And it's information that comes up on every project as well, the information from CDT. And it's a certification. When you pass your CDT, you are now CDT certified. It's an amazing thing. I'm a big fan of it.
That was great. I'll definitely give my experience with it, but it was that explanation that you gave that convinced me to get my own a few years ago. And just to echo what you said is that we believe anyone in the building industry should get this certification because it's not just for architects. You and I happen to be licensed architects that are also CDT certified, but I think that as part of our careers and as part of, just kind of the life of a project and a life of a building, that it's good knowledge to have, it's good training to have. So I decided to get CDT certified right after I finished my AREs. And of course, it was just kind of with the knowledge that a lot of the information was similar to that of the AREs. So it was a continuation. And, it's not given by NCARB. It's given by the Construction Specifications Institute. It's CSI. And so the CDT certification is, it takes things like a step further for me than what the ARE exams did. So the ARE exam was really good about describing roles and responsibilities of parties in a project with primary focus on the architect, the owner, and the contractor. But what I really liked about the CDT is that it was involving, in the full lifespan of a project, it was involving suppliers, manufacturers, and even project managers, anyone else who would interact with a project and add to it throughout the design process, development, all the way through to construction. So I think as a licensed architect, as someone who's practicing architecture, I wanted to take that step further and know even more and be able to bring that knowledge and that training to job sites and to the various consultants that I know I have to work with. And so I really appreciated the certification for really encouraging responsible communication between all parties. As architects, we're not just kind of living in our office in our little vacuum and not interacting with all these parties. So I really enjoyed that part of it. And I feel more confident on job sites having this certification. And the best thing was that it wasn't any information that wasn't already intuitively coming to me as someone who had been studying for the AREs for years. A lot of the information was something I'd heard before. It just was, really bringing the message home. And it was more of practicing that knowledge and that information, not really learning it for the first time. So it was pretty easy. Not to say, not to say that it's not absolutely worth it. It was easy because it was intuitive, but I definitely felt my confidence was strengthened through the certification. It was refreshing to take an exam that was different from the AREs, which I had been taking for many years. And it's nice to have that kind of connection to a network of people that work in the building industry that aren't necessarily architects, because a lot of suppliers or building reps or even project managers have this certification as well.
You're listening to the Architect Exam Podcast, your guide to passing the ARE.
Hey there, this is Michael, and I have a quick favor to ask. If you're finding value in this free ARE podcast, please take a second to follow, like, subscribe, and leave a review or a comment on whatever platform you happen to hear this podcast. Your engagement lets us know that people are actually listening, and it inspires us to keep creating more podcast episodes. But honestly, what matters most to me isn't the likes or the follows. It's sharing this podcast with others who need it. When I was studying for my exams years ago, I felt completely alone and everyone was hoarding information instead of helping each other out. And it was that frustration that led me to start Young Architect back in 2014 with a simple mission: help the next generation of architects become the most successful generation of architects. So please share this podcast with your colleagues, friends, or anyone tackling their AREs. By sharing knowledge, we all rise together. All right, back to the podcast. What I really loved about CDT is, well, first off, this is the book. It's called The Project Delivery Practice Guide. Never in my career have I ever seen, I just run through all those phases from the conception through design, through construction, never have I ever seen all the different phases be so beautifully outlined with what happens here and there and this and that. Like the Architect's Handbook of Professional Practice, it is what it is. There's a lot of valuable information in there, but it doesn't explicitly outline all the steps a project goes through. You don't even get that in architecture school, for crying out loud. I don't know about everyone else, but in my architecture school, we're just hanging out in schematic design, designing weird stuff and talking about, is this going to work, Whereas this really ties it all together, And the sad thing about architecture school is that, with no disrespect, but like schematic design is actually one of the smallest phases of the project. I said, I did a project a couple of years ago where I was the owner's rep. We said it was an architect, an interior designer, and some of the owner's people. We all sat at a table and we spent an hour and a half hashing out a design for this interior thing we're working on. And then we spent the next year and a half executing that design. The design didn't change. Right. It was all the execution, the materials, all figuring out all these parts and all these pieces, the permits, all of the stuff.
Right.
So, and I think that brings us back to why so many candidates are getting CDT certified.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, we're seeing suddenly a lot of architects or soon to be architects gaining this certification. And I think the message is really coming home for them that this is essential knowledge, and it's knowledge that strengthens your role as an architect.
I also have been saying too to the boot campers for the past couple of years is studying for PCM, PGM, CE. That's 80% of the work it takes to pass the CDT certification. And you know what the other 20% stuff is? It's the stuff that you and I never learned, Emily, that's exclusive to this exam, and CSI, has their things.
What is it? Their own language.
Like what is it? The 4 C's.
The 4 C's.
To never seem to remember.
Yeah. The 4 C's of communication.
Yeah. It's like all this other stuff that like this exam kind of like, I've never heard of it until I studied for this. And it's not hard stuff.
What's something else that I forgot to say that I'll just say really quick?
Yeah.
And I actually thought this at first as well when I took the certification was I thought this was an exam that was going to teach me how to write specifications. And it's not. I know that it's given by the Construction Specifications Institute. And in a part of the exam, it does talk, about proper communication and proper language use for writing specifications. But I just want everyone to know that that's not what it is. It's not writing specifications makes you better at your job. It's helpful to write them well, but that is not the main focus of this exam.
It does a beautiful job of teaching specifications, though.
It really does.
Even as a licensed architect, I learned a lot about specs from this CDT certification.
Me too.
And before I took the CDT, I thought specs were kind of a boring, dorky topic. And after taking CDT, I kind of see the value and really fell in love with specifications and understanding how it all works. And I think CSI has done a fantastic job.
It took the mystery away. It's not like something you just pass along for someone else to do. You can really appreciate well-written specs and see the need for them and be able to identify when they're not written well. It's fun, really. When you dive into it this way, it's really fun information.
So getting back to why there are so many people taking it is, it's an easy win. Everything that's on that test is in this book. Whereas the architect exam, it's all over the freaking place. You don't know where to look at, where to study anything. And then another thing I like about this test, Emily, is that it's an easy test to take. Architect exam, it's let me give you all this data, let me give you all this information, and it's your job to synthesize all of it and put it all together and figure out what's the right decision the architect needs to make. CDT, it's like, what is this and what is that? Did you read the book? Do you understand how these things kind of fit together? But it is on an intellectual level, it's much more straightforward than the architect exam is really testing. But to even take things to the next level, tell them what we did, Emily.
We also put together a course for the CDT 101 course, where we go through that book. We put it into our own words. We put some real life experiences and stories behind it to help the information stick, just to make it that much easier to dive into the CDT certification.
In practice questions, we
Yes.
wrote hundreds of practice questions for the CDT. And the good problem we had is our questions are harder than the real CDT questions. And, we're so used to making ARE prep study materials. I felt like we had to approach it from an ARE prep perspective, where rather than what is a change order? We need to prove that give you a situation and a scenario, and it's you need to understand and choose an answer that requires you of knowing what a change order is. And so, I don't know, we probably went above and beyond and took these CDT questions to like a level that they didn't really need to be, but I want people to pass, And so,
Absolutely. Yeah, and also to just make it worth your time, I mean, we may have written them at a higher degree of difficulty, but we also wrote them with stories. There's like
Yeah.
fun graphics, so it's not some boring multiple choice, practice test that you're going to take and get bored with. It's very interactive, it's memorable, and so that way you can make, gaining an extra certification just a little bit more fun.
Yeah, and my logic too is if we give them study materials that are like harder than the real test when they show up, things go a lot easier on test day. So,
Right.
eh, and back to like the young architect mission, it's not just about passing stupid exams. Like, hell, let's become great architects. And CDT is not even just for architects; it's for everyone that works in construction. So, a lot of people passed their CDTs who used it.
Yeah, I got a lot of messages, people saying that they used the course and that they were very grateful that they did. And it just, I mean, I had a lot of fun putting it together with you, so I knew it was a win. But it to have it come full circle, a couple months later, everyone telling us that they passed and that they used the course, it feels great.
You're listening to the Architect Exam Podcast, the official podcast of the Young Architect Academy.
One of the things that I'm not crazy about with CDT, and I've been complaining about this for years, I've been actually overly vocal about it, is the CDT schedule. And I think it actually hurts the CDT more than anything else. And here's why, is with the architect exam, you have to, when you think you're starting to get ready to take that test, you schedule it and you keep studying and you show up and you take that test, you pass it, and you move on. The CDT, it's a completely opposite, different sequence. Now, the CDT is only offered twice a year. You can either take it in the spring or you can take it in the fall. When I say spring, that means like the first week of May to the first week of June, or it's like the first week of November to the first week of December. And that's when you take the test. However, you sign up for the CDT months in advance. And the longer you wait to the testing cycle, to the testing window, the more expensive the test is. And there's such a disconnect between when you sign up and when you actually take the test. It's kind of frustrating. That's the hardest things for so many people, because in February, it's like, hey, you're going to take this test in May. People are like, May? I don't know what I'm doing next week. Like you're trying to talk to me about 5 months down the line. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges with the CDT. And then after you take the test, they close out the testing. And someone said it took 45 days for them to get their test result for the CDT. It's a long wait. So,
And everyone gets their results at the same time, which is why, these last few days we've gotten a lot of messages about everyone who passed, which is great, but there's a long wait period between that investment of time and then the result.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't make the rules. I just follow them.
Well, if that's the only downfall or, downside of the CDT, I think it's manageable. It's like a little different than any other exam. You don't sign up when you're ready. You kind of have to take it just these 2 windows of time. But that's really the only downside of it to me.
Yeah. Emily, what's your advice to someone who's in the middle of taking their architect exams, and just learning about the CDTs? What would you say to them?
Because this information covers a lot of topics that you may already know, I think it's a great way to gain a certification during your journey of the ARE exams. And the exam process through CSI and by gaining the CDT is so much easier than the ARE exams. I'm not just talking about the content itself, but even just the platform,
Mhm.
even just navigating the platform in that test center. So if you're maybe in a place where you're taking an area division and not doing well and having to retake and it's getting frustrating, this may be a breath of fresh air for you to go in, get this certification under your belt, gain that confidence, and be able to have something while you're still working in that big picture for the ARE exam. I think that it might feel daunting to add something else to the mix, but I think just switching it up and maybe taking this on will be a lot easier than you think it is and may actually help you on the rest of your, ARE journey.
I think in a perfect world, Emily, everyone would do their CDTs before they started studying for their pro practice exams. But I've learned this lesson the hard way that people they want their architect exams. Give me the architect
Yeah.
exam, Mike. I don't want this other thing getting in the way with me making progress. And so actually for the past couple of years, I've been saying, while you're marching through your architect exams, honestly, I'm watching our boot campers spend like 1 to 2 weeks of dedicated CDT studying and passing this test. And
I
it's
agree.
it really, I don't see it as a distraction at all whatsoever. It's a huge compliment in some ways.
It strengthens the information that you're already studying. It's not taking away at all.
And I remember we were talking to some guy at one of our webinars, and I remember when he told us, Emily, he's like, I did the CDT actually in the middle of my last 2 exams, PPD and PDD. He's like, I know like the content doesn't really overlap or this or that. He's like, but the beautiful thing about CDT was he's like, at the time when I took it, I felt like I had been so beaten down from the architect exam. And I had failed, multiple exams. And here I am at the tail end of my exam and I'm busting my butt trying to wrap it up. He's like, the CDT was a breath of fresh air. And I walked in, I took the test and I thought it was easy. And I found out I freaking passed and it just like blew me up. And I just like, all right, now I got to wrap up my architect exams.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah, you get really burnt out taking these 6 divisions over and over. And I think that, mix it up. You already know a lot of this information and it's going to give you that boost to really just charge ahead and finish the whatever remaining divisions you have with the ARE. I know that it's a completely different exam given from a different entity, but it's so relative to what you're already doing and it might just be that boost you need on what you're already studying.
So if you're interested in learning more about CDT, there's a lot of good free information available. Let me tell you how to find it. Twice a year, CSI. Right before early bird registration opens up, CSI, they actually have Emily and I do like an informational session on it. And what we do is Emily and I, we get a bunch of people, we talk about CDT, we give a little presentation, we break it all down. It's more about sharing information about it. We have one coming up in a couple weeks, but after that session happens, anyone can show up and plug in their email address and watch the recording of what the last one was. And so you can find that information at youngarchitect.com/CDT webinar, all as one word, CDT webinar. And then a couple years ago, I spent a lot of time writing this whole thing out. I made this heavily produced video for CSI about why everyone in the architecture profession should take this certification and why it's important. And so if you're interested in watching that video, it's at youngarchitect.com/CDT. And then Emily and I mentioned the course we made. If you're interested in that, it's at youngarchitect.com/CDT 101. I think that's everything I got about CDT. Anything I forgot, Emily?
The only thing I would add is that if you're still kind of wondering what the CDT is, I think if you want to jump on LinkedIn and actually type in CDT and see who else is CDT certified, you'll be surprised to see how many people in your network or just in the building industry have this certification as well.
Thanks for listening to the Architect Exam Podcast. Ready to take your studying to the next level? Visit our online ARE Architecture School website at academy.youngarchitect.com to learn more about how we can help you. See you next time.